Hello again. We're at the next program of the Armenian-American Perspective with Martin Harutunyan, and our guest today is a renowned rug master. I think if that's the correct terminology, he can correct me. Hratch Kozibeyokian. Um, Before we start, because of where we are today in Armenia, I wanted to just say a few words about what's going on in Voskebar. Um, we have only land to liberate. We have nothing to give. That should be in the minds and souls and hearts of every single Armenian from Los Angeles to Australia. This is something that I think should be a non-starter, that whether we should consider, do we have to give, what do we have to exchange, are there enclaves, is there this or is there that? The second aspect directly related to this is the absurd notion of if we sacrifice, we will have peace. Or, well, it's possibly theirs to begin with, it's arguable. Because it's the week of April 24th, I wanted to remind our listeners that when the genocide started and during the genocide, and even before and after, when Armenian children were taken away from their homes and used as house servants or even worse, Armenians at different parts of the world got together and they either purchased their freedom or fought their way to get theirs because they knew that they were Armenian children in the hands of Turks. So they liberated those children. Just like those children were liberated, our lands are our children, and we need to liberate those lands, not sacrifice them. That was just an opener. We can follow up with it as you wish, but I wanted to welcome Baron Hratch in joining us today. I know he has a lot to share. For those that don't know, he is, and again, Baron Hratch can correct me if I'm wrong, he's a renowned, not only craftsman, a historian of rugs, and not only in the Armenian, probably internationally, one of the few that's around that is this, I don't want to say dying art form, but possibly forgotten art form that's an integral part of specifically Armenian culture. But since I know very little about it, I don't want to delve into it. Baron Hratch, if you can uh, tell our viewers a short bio of yourself and what you do and what led you to that path.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, Kokor and Martin, for inviting me. Briefly, my family, as far as I know, which goes to my grandfather on the paternal side, they were weavers. My grandfather was a traveling weaver from village to village to weave for the local households different types of floor coverings, bed coverings, etc., etc. During the 1915 genocide, my father loses his father at the age of 9, being the oldest of 3 boys. After school in Armenian refugee camps that were set up by the American Nearest Relief, after school, he would sit down and weave rugs with his mother. And as we all know, the majority of the survivors of that genocide were women, children, and elderly. And those women, I praise them, they became the fathers and the mothers and the friends and teachers and everything they could do to raise their families. So in short, I'm a 3rd generation from the genocide who was able to, continue the craft and take it further by having the luxury of unlike my father or that generation, which they didn't have the luxury to go to school and to do an in-depth study, the academic side of the weaving tradition of Armenian rugs and textiles. But I was lucky enough and fortunate to be in the United States and did my studies in cultural anthropology. And since being in this trade from the very young age and having a very curious mind, it always puzzled me why the Armenian rugs were so geometric and abstract versus the neighboring countries or neighboring cultures, that they were more ornamental, floral, just decorative patterns that you can look at them and know what they are. Trees, branches, etc., etc. Birds, animals. But when you look at the Armenian carpets that continuously were produced in Armenian culture, were abstract with and slightly changed and developed throughout various generations. And you could see the development from different ages. And I was always curious. Eventually, my studies and my research led to me to believe, and I did produce several posters exhibiting that those were ideograms, not only decorative patterns. They were more totemic expressions of our ancestors. The Armenian elders, older women, didn't know how to read and write, but that didn't mean they didn't have a wisdom to pass it on to future generations. And right now I'm working on a virtual museum who will be exhibiting all what I'm talking about and doing a comparison, comparative analysis, and the continuity from petroglyphs until modern day, how Armenian culture utilized those patterns. And to take the study further, what do they mean? In this way, we could maybe understand the pre-Christian belief system and some of the rituals, some of the superstitions, etc., etc. Since in our modern education doesn't have, or very vaguely through Moses Khorenatsi, we know about the Armenian history, the Armenian pre-Christian history, I should say, which is much, much longer in time than the Christian era. And also it puzzles me how the folk arts, fine arts interact in politics. What role do they play in the longevity of the culture of the people? And without going into the details, if I look at the Armenian historical maps, all the way from the beginning until today, up until 501 BC, the Armenian territory, what was it? And every 100 years or so, how it shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And some of that was attributed, I believe, from the mentality, how the Armenian mentality has changed. In other words, in many of Armenian carpets, we do see a depiction of the traditional ones, dragons, two dragons standing in guard, guarding a tree of life, for example. how that changed in Christian era into, instead the tree transformed into a cross and the dragons transformed into doves, which we see in many khachkars. Anyway, without going any further into that subject. So that's what I do. That's what my passion is. But my main income is designing rugs. I do design and have custom weave carpets for hotels, for mansions, for non-regular carpets, specific sizes, specific types, specific colors. That's where I earn my living, but I invest in traditional Armenian rugs that were woven pre-Soviet era. I am also involved in Armenian Rug Society. I'm the current president. Actually, I've been the president for the past 7 years. That was founded in 1981 in Washington, D.C. by several very patriotic Armenians, one of them being Viken Sasuni, the son of none other than Garo Sasuni, James Keshishian, which is still today, he's the one, actually his son, they serve all the carpets for the White House. Also, Lemiel Amirian of Vanetsi, who was involved in the Battle of Van. Several patriotic people that at that time realized the importance of the soft power, the preserving and conserving the this branch of the Armenian culture. At that time, most of these carpets were known as Turkish, or best, Caucasian. Nowhere you could see any Armenians. There are very, very few publications that vaguely mention the word Armenian in certain types, but not as vast as what we have today. If today you Google Armenian rugs, you have over 800,000 Google search results. Thanks to Armenian Rug Society and its volunteer members that we do this. So I've been on the board since 1990 and the president for the past 7 years. I hope I didn't take too much time. So just
no, not
not
at all. Baron Hratch, just out of curiosity, what part of historic Armenia does your family originate from?
Well, my paternal side is from Aintab, but my maternal side is Zeytunsi. In fact, there is another very interesting.
Two fierce fighters.
Yes. Well, you know, these days I've been thinking what's happening in Armenia. It happened exactly the same thing in Zeytun. Zeytun was one of the last that fell. Actually, it didn't fall. It was given to Turks by the Archbishop. Archbishop begged and convinced the people to give up their arms for the sake of peace. My grandfather, being the youngest of 7 brothers, refused and rebelled against the Archbishop. He said, "Nobody can take my rifle from my hand. You can take it over my dead body. I wouldn't trust those SOBs." So he took his arms, he took his few things, and he wasn't alone, with about 300 young men similar to him, led by Commander Aram Bey, they called him, Leader Aram. they went to the mountains. Lo and behold, after 3 days, the so-called peace came with fire and massacres. And he survived for 3 years. They were battling and resisting in the mountains of Cilicia and walking their way to Aleppo. When they reached Aleppo, the government in Aleppo at that time was French. It was a French colony. They made a group photo. How did this man survive? How did they make it all the way from Cilicia to Aleppo by fighting their way? And there is a group photo of them and a single photo of him. Mind you, I should also mention that he belonged to the Bokan clan, which was a very big clan. While he was fighting, he gets a word that from his clan, there's only one girl survived besides him, 14-year-old distant cousin, which also shared his last name, Bokan, but it was a distant cousin who escaped, went to Marash from Zeytun to Marash, and she was hidden in the priest's house. So he changes his look at night with 2 of his friends, bodyguards. They sneak into Marash. They find his cousin, and the priest says, look, she cannot stay here. If the Turks find, that will be a punishment for all my clan and my people in this neighborhood. You have to take her with you. My grandmother says, no, my grandfather says, we all are boys. We are about 300 men. How can I have a 14-year-old girl? My grandma says, I'm becoming a boy. She takes a scissor, she trims her hair, she changes her clothing, she takes her arm, and being the only woman in 300 men, she fights her way also with those men all the way to Aleppo. In fact, she survived all the way until I was 21, 22. She was still alive. And that's my maternal side.
That's fascinating.
So
yeah.
it answers a few of our questions of how you wound up who you are. Number one, it's important that we all know our history, where we came from. Yeah. And of course, it helps when we have such a dignified history. I think many Armenians would be surprised if they found out who their forefathers are, if they don't go too back. But excuse my language, they have to give a shit first and then go from there.
It's unfortunate. I agree.
Yeah, and you know it in detail. And Baron Hratch, so if I'm not mistaken, you came to the U.S. in the mid-70s?
Yes, I came to Chicago in 1977. Ironically, escaped from the another civil war that was occurring in Lebanon. My father was here before me. My father was hired by another Armenian carpet company as a restorer. So I joined him in 1977, but I couldn't take the cold. Being a Mediterranean boy, raised in the Mediterranean climate, the Chicago cold was too much for me. So I visited Los Angeles in 1978, 79, and decided that this climate much more closer to our nature. So I fetched also my family. By then, my brothers and sisters also were there. We are, by the way, 3 brothers and 2 sisters. I am being right in the middle. I have a brother older than me, a sister older than me, then a sister younger than me, a brother youngest. So we all are here. but they didn't find the carpet business to be to help them, because we left most of our belongings, and it takes a very big capital to start a carpet business, big capital. They went into different businesses, different ventures, but I stuck with carpet. And because of my interest in the historical meaning of what these carpets reflect in our history, so I continued my business since then.
Hratch, it's interesting. Both you and I have Eintetsi roots on our paternal side. Also, you know, we were both around here in the United States in the 1970s and 80s, when the political life of the Armenian diaspora community was much more active than it is today. You know, growing up at that time, April 24th to us was Armenian Cause Day, Hai Tadior or Hai Datior. And now it's become Genocide Remembrance Day. What do you think happened? Why, you know?
You know, as I was growing up in the Armenian quarter of Lebanon, which was Burchamut, we were raised, basically, we are, as children, we are either at the school, at night home, dinner, sleep, or at the Armenian center, Agum, we call it, okay? The area that I grew up was the Tashnaktsutyun Agum. And I attended, I was Badani, we call it, the teenage youth, just similar to AYF. And during all that time, April 24 was a day of struggle and day of reparations. We did demonstrations, we did all that, and it was a demand, and I was familiar from very young age to the Wilsonian Arbitral Award, and we were getting lectures and presentations from older people and the history. And then 1965 to 1965 to early 70s, there was a paradigm shift and change from demand to recognition. I think that was a major mistake. Now, I'm not sure if that was done. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but looking back now, it seems that it did hurt us more than if we were stuck into that reparation instead of playing the victim card. From being a demanding, aggressive people and having a cause to fight for, we turned into victims. And we started begging from nations a recognition, which, as you all know, is not serving anything. Even though right now, United States government officially recognized it, and many other nations in the world. Now what? Nothing. Armenia, today's Armenian government started putting on the suspect by asking us to name the list of the who massacred. There is something really, really wrong there. I think we got misled, and the arbitral award, if we would have stuck and we did the effort of, instead of the genocide recognition, instead of doing genocide recognition, we put the same effort on the arbitral award, we will be in a much better place now. I think so. Mind you, by saying that, I don't mean to not, remember our losses, respect, have a commemoration, have a memorial day for them, etc., etc., etc. I've lost families also, but the resources that we're spending for the past, over 50 years maybe, what did it result to?
We're at a negative.
We are, aren't we?
And they did the same thing with the Artsakh issue. When it started, we were talking about miatsum, unification, and slowly, as you said, the paradigm between 65 and 75, between 88 and, I don't know, mid-90s, it went from unification to, again, recognition, recognize Artsakh. So they kept misleading us, and Armenians being, I think, very bright, very amiable people, but we have this ultra kindness and ultra naivete that I think we fall for the same trick over and over again. So I think it's no coincidence that reparation changed to recognition and unification changed to recognition, which led us to us not having Artsakh as of today, and us not having a single ounce of reparation. So I fully agree. And of course, what the reasons are, you mentioned the Armenian government. I hesitate to use the word Armenian and government in the same in the same breath, because I think it's very clear. Yeah, of course. I think it's very clear that they do not, not from Levon until Nikol, because I put them all in the same category. They have never represented Armenian nationhood, Armenian statehood, nor the Armenian people. They have all been vassals of Moscow, and Nikol himself, I believe, and you can add to it, Baron Hratch, is not only a vassal of Moscow, but is also a vassal of now Ankara and Baku for the first time, which we could not necessarily say the same thing about his predecessors.
Well, when we try to analyze and look for reasons why all this is happening, usually we do point finger at our government and some foreign governments or enemies of Armenia, etc., etc. But there is another fact that played a big part in the way of thinking of, in general, Armenian people, whether it's in diaspora or Armenia. During almost the same time, two things, major causes, also played a major role in Armenian mentality. For the diasporan Armenian, when I say diasporan Armenian, I meant the Western Armenians who survived the genocide and following generations of that of those people. It took 2 generations, at least 2 to 3 generations, for them to fight for their physical survival. I mean, their priorities were their physical survival. It is no less than the 3rd generation that started going into the academia, started reaching at points where they have the luxury to get involved in the so-called Armenian cause. That's about the survivors of the genocide. And that left so much time, at least 2 generations, for them to rebound. In the case of people in Armenia, similar thing happened when the Bolsheviks took over. And that played a big part in literally killing the national identity in Armenia, in the Armenian people. Mind you, not only the Armenian people, they did the same thing with other countries who became the so-called Soviet Union by trying to create this homogenic society mix of all the others. And I was about a year and a half ago in Armenia. I was invited to lecture on Armenian carpets. I was in awe. Literally, people, this I'm saying with a bleeding heart, they don't know who they are. During Soviet era, the academia was more towards industrial science, so forth, so on, but almost zero when it came to the national identity, history, religion, nothing. Our ancient monasteries, monuments were turned into stables. And this is the result. And add to that the recent administrations of the so-called Free Armenia, not allowing the interference of the diaspora and fresh mentality to play a part in rebuilding Armenia, putting that gap between us and them, Hayastansi, Arev Madahaitsi, Lipanansi, etc., etc. We all are Armenians, mind you. We are so rich. Yes, we have different dialects. That's our richness. At one time, Armenia had over 200 dialects. The Armenian folk dances, we have over 200 folk dances. People in the same region, Kurds, the maximum folk dance they have are about 7 to 9. We are so rich in our culture. And I dare to say, probably Armenians were one of the only, if not the only people that survived from the ancient times. Look at the world's oldest map, the Babylonian clay in the British Museum. There are 3 countries in them: Assyria, Babylonia, Armenia.
Only Armenia remains.
Barely.
Yeah, well,
But it remains.
Yes.
And for
many
that
things
reason, it'll continue to
contributed.
remain.
Many things, I believe, contributed to our decline. It's not one thing. And let's not really focus on finding guilt of certain things. It's so complex. And those big nations, what's happening today, I'm in awe. 3 years ago, I was invited by Azerbaijani government, Ministry of Culture of Azerbaijan, to talk about Caucasian rugs. Full board, everything paid, plus gifts, etc., etc., etc. I am having very, very difficult time to bring 3 to 5 scholars in Armenia to jointly publish a book. I'm having such a difficulty. We in diaspora were fighting and trying to regain our cultural heritage and protect it way before the so-called 1992 freedom of Armenia, way before. In fact, it was only our culture that kept us who we are as Armenian. Martin is another example. It was only the culture. Before, in mid-80s, who would have thought that Armenia can become independent? Soviet Union will just disappear. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that Artsakh can be back regained and reclaimed by Armenians, liberated? Who would have thought? But being second, third generations, we stuck to our culture. And our culture kept us who we are. Mind you, we always had diaspora. For example, 17th century, the Armenians of New Julfa, who were world travelers, they were the merchants who dominated the Indian Ocean. They were the major merchants throughout Middle East to all the way far east. Armenian merchants,
even to the Caribbean.
Absolutely. They all over. What kept them going? What kept them Armenian? Their culture.
Baron Hratch, I'm sorry to say we have less than 3 minutes left. It went by very quickly. Martincan, if you want to...
I just want to throw out one last question to Baron Hratch. Baron Hratch, you are a man of arts and culture. And I'm a musician, and we know we deal a lot with a lot of people.
I'm a musician too, by the way. I'm a drummer.
Ah, there we go.
Okay.
So a lot of people in our circles, when you ask them about, when you talk to them, many of them say, "Oh, I don't interfere with politics." Yes, I hear this a lot from people in the arts and culture. Now, you have been in arts and culture for a very, very long time, but you've also been very active in Armenian politics for a very long time. What do you say to people that say, "Oh, I don't take part in"? I don't.
Those musicians who say I don't take part in politics, they can continue going and playing the mugham and those I don't know what they call those style of songs, instead of really listening to Armenian music. I don't know what to tell to them. The air we breathe is politics today. Right now, we are looking at the computer. The information that the Facebook, social media is gathering from you is politics.
Just saying that you're Armenian is a political statement.
That's it.
Right.
Your existence is politics. Unless you just want to be I don't know, a zombie.
That's the word that's used. And I'm sorry to again cut you off. So we actually have a few seconds left. Thank you, Baron Hratch, very much for your time. And we didn't mention, but a speedy recovery to you.
Thank you.
And Martincan, we'll speak soon again, and we hope to have you back.
Thank you. Anytime, gentlemen.